Hello, I'm back. I was laying in bed with my knitting, and I kept thinking, I wonder what's happening in that John Bryan chapter. So, here I am. Okay, someone said that I touch my hair too much, and I do. I know it's a problem. Sorry. Anyway, my best advice would be don't watch, just listen. But I am trying more. And there's a lot of things that I do too much, if I'm perfectly honest. I clear my throat too much. I scratch my nose too much. If I have earrings in, I play with my earrings too much. I have ADHD, and it's really hard for me to watch myself on camera and not fiddle with things. Womp womp. So, if my finicking is too distracting, I would really suggest just turning off your screen. I guess you can only do that if you have YouTube Premium. I'm one of the losers that pays for it because I love it. Just, put your phone down or, just do something else while it's on. I am going to try more or at all. Okay. That being said, let's find out what's going on. Did I say that I have ADHD, so it's really hard to watch myself? No. I mean, I have ADHD. It's really hard for me to sit still, so I do start to mess with things, and it's hard for me to watch myself. And I just always start noticing things, and anyway, there's a lot of backstory, but we're not going to get into it. All right, John Bryan. The other Texas Ranger riding roughshod through the life of the Duchess of York was John Bryan, a cousin of Steve Wyatt's through a series of complicated marriages on the part of various aunts and uncles. He moseyed onto the Royal Prairie in the late summer of 1991, but it was not until some weeks later that his name became publicly linked with hers. Johnny had been born in the East Coast state of Delaware? Is Delaware considered an East Coast state? Am I crazy? I grew up in Maine. Maine's on the East Coast. But Delaware? Help. Is it? What? All right. East Coast state of Delaware. Meet. On 30 June 1955, the son of a copper magnate who moved the family to New York when John was still a youngster. He was in his teens when his parents divorced and was sent to school in Houston, Texas, where he struck up a close friendship with Stephen Wyatt, the college jock, which would endure for the next 20 years and more. Both young men were good at sport, became expert skiers, and dabbled in the health food cult that was part of their upbringing. They also, when you think about it, being a health food nut during, any time before, I don't know, 80s or 90s, well, the 70s, I don't know, it must have been so interesting. That in episodes of Columbo and things like that, people who are into health food, they're always like really wingdingy, They're also like into psychics and the moon cycles, and yeah, it's just a whole other, it's just interesting how everything shifts, right? Hi, Joey. Health food cult that was part of their upbringing. They also joined the exclusive clique known as the Texas Longhorns, a group of playboy bachelors who worshiped the twin gods of hard work and hedonism. The first I knew of this particular Longhorn was when the phone rang out of the blue one morning in October 1991, and the excited voice of Catherine Lowe shrilled down the line. "Leslie, there's a new man in my life. His name's John Bryan. You've got to meet this guy. I can't make him out. He's outrageous. He's flashy. He's posy. But he's got something." Catherine was a girlfriend I had known for 3 years, whom I first met at a party in Chelsea. And we missed a chapter without our favorite character appearing, but she's back. I had given her a lift home in my Rolls. Honestly, I think the Rolls is a main character at this point. To which she reacted with the comment, "This car is so big, you've got to shout from one end to the other to make yourself heard." She was a vivacious, attractive girl in her late 20s who came from the wealthy, low... Is it low or lowy? I don't know. Leather family. Moved in society circles. Someone who's from Britain, you can let me know. Just the sort of girl to be targeted by John Bryan, I would discover, in his ruthless quest to conquer the Everests of London's top echelons. Catherine was a bright young woman with a mind of her own. She had a degree in the history of art from the University of East Anglia and had worked in various West End galleries. We found we shared more than one common interest, not least of which was a capacity to organize events. She specialized in conferences, and when my tournament was approaching, we would compare notes on what lay ahead. Right now, her consuming interest was this tall, personable 36-year-old American businessman who had waltzed into her life a few days previously at Tramps. The German street haunt, for frig's sakes, haunt of the rich, the famous, and those who aspired to be both. Come and have dinner. I want you to meet him, and he wants to meet you. Now, I'm a little distracted because I think amongst the pictures that Timothy has had a bite. Oh, yes, there she is. Oh, gosh, isn't she pretty? That's Catherine. Oh, she's just a little doll. She's so gorgeous. I love her hair. Oh, I wish I could have that hair. I don't know. I just think she's the cutest little thing. Her little eyelashes. If I could look like anything, I'd want to look like that. I think she's so pretty. Okay. Let's go back. So... West End Galleries. So he wants to meet you. Fine with me, I said, mildly amused. If she was happy, so was I. That's so interesting because the last thing that I do when I get a man is I'm never like, hey, everyone, come meet him. I just hoard him. I'm very, I don't know, I'm not antisocial. I'm very social, but I just keep my life so separate. It's the strangest thing. You know what? We realized the other day we have almost no pictures together. Like none. Because neither of us, like when we go places, neither of us are the type to pull out our phone. And so I'm going to have to start carrying like a film camera with me or something. Because we just never think to take pictures when we're places. We might take pictures of like the scenery. But we're never like, teeth. So... I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway. Oh, yeah. I would just never be like, hey, do you want to meet my pretty single girlfriend? No way. I don't know. She was very pretty. I don't know if you've watched the interview yet. If you have, let me know. Like, meet me in the comments. She was actually very, very pretty, in my personal opinion. I know I said a lot that she wasn't pretty. She was very pretty. Fine with me, I said, mildly amused. If she was happy, so was I. We fixed a date for the following Saturday night at 190 Queen's Gate. I arrived on time to find Catherine waiting for me alone. I don't know where John is, she said with a hopeless shrug, but he's like that. I'm sure he'll turn up. Tell me, I said, who is this man? Over the veal and salad. What, are you telling me that they're already eating and this man didn't show up? Well, Catherine told me how John Bryan had picked her up. I'd gone to Tramps with another girlfriend, she began. Amanda, you don't know her. She's an actress. A little zany, but a lot of fun. We had been to a party and had got bored with it. And Amanda suggested, let's go to Tramps. It had been one of those Chelsea parties, and we were both dressed in wild outfits. I was in a leopard skin mini dress and looked totally outrageous. We were sitting at the bar, and Amanda was being very noisy, laughing and chatting with the waiters, and the way she always did. It can be a very friendly place. She was saying, give me another bottle of champagne now, or I'll tell your grandmother in Sicily. They loved it. John Bryan was standing with a friend at the other end of the bar, eyeing us. I honestly knew nothing about him. I'd never heard of him, and he had yet to make headlines as the Duchess of York's friend and financial advisor. The pair of them had been laughing at Amanda's behavior. The next thing I knew, Johnny was standing at my elbow and saying, "Can I buy you a drink?" We were all laughing at nothing in particular, as people do when they're having fun or drinking too much, and then he added the oldest pickup line in the world. "What are you two girls doing in a place like this?" Original, I thought, looking at Catherine's animated face, but she had obviously fallen for it. "Go on," I said. Johnny invited us both back to a table he had reserved, and all of a sudden the waiters were swarming around us like flies. They just could not do enough for this man. The owner, John Gold, came over and shook his hand and said, "Welcome," and I thought, who is this guy? But he was terribly entertaining and charming, and a wonderful dancer, as I found out when he took me on the floor and waltzed me off my feet whatever tune they were playing. Okay, he was being terribly forward, as so many Americans are, but fun at the same time and not at all offensive. I was intrigued. Catherine had been around this sort of scene for years now, was not the sort of girl to be swept off her feet by your average fast-talking American. This man, Brian, must have something. He still didn't put in an appearance, and I was starting to get the feeling that we were being stood up. It didn't matter. Catherine and I always had a good time in each other's company, and we had a lot of news to catch up on. She was still pouring out her story. Let me tell you, if I had been stood up, I wouldn't be sitting there in the restaurant like, "This is how we met." I'd be like, "It's over." Like, or something better be wrong. I'd be worried. It would be, those one of two things. Either it'd be done, or I would be very, very, very worried. That night, Johnny was on such a high. He had completed some amazing deal. Don't ask me what. And he was celebrating. The champagne flowed like water. He kept saying, "It's really major." And he had a spark about him, unlike so many of the wealthy playboys and jet-setters you meet in places like Tramps who are just plain boring. As for Amanda, she was getting more and more outrageous. At one point, she said to me, "Come on, Catherine, let's swap clothes here and now at the table or under it." Now I was really agog. "Wow, what happened then?" Catherine laughed. "She was all for taking her dress off on the spot, and she wasn't wearing anything under it." I managed to dissuade her from that, but then she insulted some other women on the dance floor by calling her a cabbage. What? The boyfriend got angry, and she told him to drop dead. Oh dear, what a night that was. But Johnny kept his cool and smoothed things over. We stayed at the club until it closed. She probably lost this friend too. Somewhere around 3 a.m. Then we all piled out into the street and found a taxi to take us back to his place. "Strictly for coffee only, ladies," was Johnny's line. And that night, that's all it was. Poor Amanda was so drunk she fell headlong into a pile of black rubbish bags on the pavement outside the club. But we pulled her out and somehow got her into a cab. We were just a hilarious, happy group having a high old time. And John, I asked, how did he behave? I was curious about this man who had suddenly sent my girlfriend's life into a somersault. Oh, we were all too tired to do more than sit around and drink coffee and try to get our heads back together. He lives in Chelsea, a top-floor flat with the most marvelous view of the river. We just sat around and talked, and then the sun came up, and he called a cab for us. Catherine sighed. He really rates himself. But there's something about him that intrigues me. That's why I rang you. I'd like to know what you think of him. At that moment, I found out. We had reached the coffee stage when there was a bustle of movement, and a tall, balding man in a patterned blue and white ski sweater and penguins was shuffling suddenly over to the table. It could only be Johnny. "Hi, women." His voice was a disarming drawl, the blue eyes lazily feigning an apology. Here was a man with total confidence in himself. I found myself thinking, a man who had power over women, and knew it. "I've just come off the ski slopes." You can turn around and go right back on. That was a novel excuse, but he had too, as it transpired, and his plane from Geneva had been delayed, and now here he was, Johnny Bryan, the man who by design or chance would cause a royal scandal. Sitting down with us. Is this before or after? Sitting down with us and taking my hand as if he had known me all his life, and saying earnestly, "Leslie, this is a real pleasure. Catherine has told me so much about you." I felt the oddest shiver flicker up and down my spine. There are some people you take an instant liking to on sight, even if you can't put a finger on why. But John Bryan was not one of them. Call it a sixth sense. As the night wore on, I would tell myself I was wrong. He was an absolute charmer, constantly laughing, always entertaining, with the incisive wit I had found in New York bankers or among the Wall Street whiz kids I had met in America. But I didn't trust him. As Catherine had said, he was flash, brash, a typical American full of his own success. He had the gift of making a girl feel relaxed. So why did I feel uneasy in his presence? I pushed my doubts away and went with the flow. Johnny called for a bottle of champagne. There's so much champagne. I don't understand. Everyone's drinking champagne all the time. Then said expansively, "Right, we're off to Tramps." We hit the club as if it were going out of style, whooping it up from the moment we descended the staircase into the bar and called for the first bottle of bubbly. Catherine and John danced the night away, and when the tall Texan persuaded me out onto the floor, I found I was in the arms of the big state's answer to Fred Astaire. Johnny was a mover and a groover, and that night he could have auditioned for a Gene Kelly musical and landed the role. Didn't she say the same thing about Steve Wyatt, that he also had really great dancing skills? At our corner table away from the dance floor, he talked business. He made it clear to us that he was hugely successful, that he ran a film business and was part owner of a nightclub in New York. Through a haze of champagne bubbles, I also gathered that he was building a hospital in Germany, though I remained unclear exactly how or where. "I'm going over there in a couple of days, girls. Do you want to come with me?" Straight to the point was Johnny. We stayed until the waiter started putting the chairs on the tables, 3 a.m., then back to Johnny's place in his chauffeur-driven Mercedes, which was on standby throughout the night. His flat was in Shane Place, off the King's Road, and although he didn't know it, previous near neighbors had included the artist, Anagoni. I'm really bad at names. That's the one who painted that. Well, hold on. That portrait Yep. That's the artist who painted this portrait of Queen Elizabeth. Very famous, very gorgeous, very stunning. Okay. So he didn't know it. And the film director, Joseph Losey, as well as a varied selection of actors, artists, and socialites, most of whom frequented the famous Pheasantry Club across the road. But Johnny was more intent on telling us about his good friends, Andy Warhol, Mick Jagger, and a whole host of other show business names. We were all three of us quite tipsy as we took the lift to his penthouse apartment, and the slightest thing would trigger us off into gales of meaningless laughter. I heard him giving Catherine a nice chat-up line. "Oh, there's so much electricity between us, I can feel it, can't you?" She remained singularly unimpressed, though she had to admit that he did have a certain charm. What? I'm so confused because one second she's telling me that Catherine has stars in her eyes over this guy, and now she's saying, oh, she's unimpressed, but she had to admit he has a little bit of charm. Like, you just spent a whole dinner with her regaling you about how wonderful he is and how there's just something about him, and he's so charming, and he's really a mover and a shaker. Like, what? His flat, when we walked into it, was a mess. A typical bachelor's pad, Catherine and I agreed. The decor, are you telling me Catherine's never been to... I'm so confused. Catherine and I agreed. The decor was rather vulgar red and gray, with 2 large red sofas in the living room, a grand piano, and a large red canvas over the fireplace. On the glass-top coffee table, this sounds like early 90s heaven to me. You know, a big red canvas, probably just painted red over the fireplace, and then you've got your, lush, delish. I'd love to see it. Big red canvas over the fireplace. On the glass-topped coffee table was a book, which looked as if it had been left there deliberately, the book that Sarah had written about Queen Victoria, and pinned to the front a note that said simply, "To John, love, S." The striking feature of that apartment was the south-facing picture window, with a wonderful view of the Thames, and the lights of South London beyond it. Now there was a showstopper. Johnny was in the kitchen opening a bottle of wine. As Catherine and I stood at the window staring out at the lights reflected in the river, I muttered out of the side of my mouth, "I hope you know what you're doing. As far as I'm concerned, this guy is a moron." "Give him a chance," she said. I went into the kitchen to make myself a coffee, just as Johnny weaved his way towards the bathroom. He left the door open and beckoned Catherine to join him. "Come on in," he called, "and see what we've got here." Through the door, I saw him produce a plastic bag of white powder from the cupboard and carefully trickle out a line onto a marble shelf. He looked at her. "Want to try some?" "Why not?" Catherine said. She would tell me later. "It's no big deal. I don't smoke dope. I've never tried anything harder than coke. And never will. I'm really not into drugs." And in the 80s, she added, most of her girlfriends had tried substances of one kind or another. I didn't see it that way. Johnny waved a hand at me. "You want some of this?" "What is it?" But of course I knew. "Coke." He took out a thin wad of 10-pound notes, selected one, and rolled it up into a tight tube. "You must be joking," I told him curtly. "I've never taken anything like this in my life, and I don't intend to start now." "Okay, fine," was all he said. See, in this, I'm like rooting for Leslie. I'm like, "Yeah, you go, Leslie. You tell him, girl." To me, it was anything but okay or fine. I think the whole drug subculture is wrong, and I don't find people who indulge in drugs particularly clever. My main thought was for Catherine, but she was a grown-up girl, and I left them to it. I marched into the living room with my coffee, took off my earrings and shoes, curled up on the sofa to watch a video on the TV, but I couldn't help glancing back. Through the bathroom door, I saw Johnny push the 10-pound note into one nostril and sniff up a whole line of the powder. Then he laid out a second line and passed the rolled-up note to Catherine. "It's all yours," he said. She told me later that she hadn't touched the stuff for a long time, at least 7 years, and certainly wasn't going to get hooked on it, but she followed suit, though with markedly less enthusiasm. Catherine explained to me when we compared notes. Really, Leslie, it did very little for me, apart from making me feel quite alert, just as if I'd had 10 cups of coffee. But Johnny, he was in seventh heaven. That was for sure. After 10 minutes, he came breezing in, talking 19 to the dozen, and without warning grabbed me, picked me up bodily from the sofa, and marched into the bedroom. Crikey, I thought, remembering a similar experience with Stephen Wyatt. Here we go again. These Texans get very physical. There was a large 4-poster bed in the middle of the room, and he dumped me down none too gently and bent over me. "Ignore me," he said. "I just want to make love to you." Gross. "No, John," I said firmly. "Come on," he urged. "Don't be so prudish." At that moment, Catherine appeared in the doorway. John's eyes lit up. "Come on, Catherine," he called. "Come and join us. Let's all have fun." I pushed a hand up against his chest. "I said no, and that means no." He didn't argue. "Okay," he said, "if that's how you feel." And he straightened up, turned on his heel, and walked out of the room. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm out of here." I got off the bed, smoothed down my dress, and followed him out. "I've got to get home." Catherine was watching the video. John shrugged his shoulders, gave me a quick, humorous look, and said, "Take my car. The driver's downstairs." "Thank you," I said. Actually, it was hard to be angry with him. What? Are you kidding me? I would have been like, "I'm leaving, and Catherine, you're with me. Like, get your little skinny behind over here. We're going." "I'll send him back." To Catherine, I whispered, "He'll be back in an hour. Will you be all right? Will you phone me?" "I'll be fine," she promised. I rescued my shoes and jumped into the lift. The Mercedes was waiting downstairs, the driver dozing at the wheel. As we eased out into King's Road and headed east, I remembered my earrings still lying on the coffee table in Johnny Bryan's apartment. As far as I was concerned, that night could stay there. That night they could stay there. The next morning, I waited anxiously for Catherine's call. When it came, she told me that she had stayed for a further hour watching TV and chatting before, as they say, making her excuses and leaving. "Johnny is okay," she said. "He's not dangerous. I never felt threatened with him, and I don't think any girl would either. He's not that type." I mean, how could you still be interested in a man who picks up your friend and wants to sleep with her? Like, my feelings would be hurt, and I would be out of there. That would be done. Catherine kept me posted. I must admit I was agog to hear how their affair progressed. In a strange way, I felt both curious and protective. But Catherine would take care of herself, and was happy to confirm that John always played the gentleman to the hilt. Ambitious, yes, he was that. A social climber, no doubt. And already he was breathing the heady air of royal approval. Catherine mixed in the kind of circles where you rub shoulders with the aristocracy, big business, and the art world. As she pointed out, When you get an American on the make, there's no stopping them. John told me how determined he was to crash the royal inner circle, and it was blatantly obvious how both he and Steve Wyatt set out deliberately to do just that. You've got connections, he kept saying. Who can you introduce me to who would be useful? Just one foot in the door, that's all I need. And further, John constantly questioned me about the gossip going on in those circles. What's the latest? Who's doing what to whom? He would ask with that boyish grin. He even asked me if I had had an affair with anyone in that crowd. I told him quite truthfully that I hadn't. But he was quite openly using me to get further up the social ladder. At least, he was discreet enough not to talk openly about Sarah. But he was definitely making plans to become an accepted part of the royal circle and ingratiate himself in the ranks. As for me, his line to get me back to his flat would always be, come back and watch videos. Now, just for the record, this is still Catherine talking. This is Catherine talking to Leslie. I told him, John, you must be able to do better than that. And he would just give me a wicked smile. Catherine went out with John Bryan for 2 months and resisted all his advances until that final night they were together. The truth is, I didn't really fancy him as much as he fancies me, she declared. When I rebuffed him, he was very polite, but my goodness, he was persistent. I knew he would keep on trying until he had worn me down. He would never give up. In some ways, he could be astonishingly naive, but in others, Johnny was nobody's fool. He could show a girl a very good time, but I wasn't interested in having a casual fling. If I have a relationship, it has to be something a good deal more serious. He's a playboy, and I knew I wasn't the only girl in his life. Once I asked him if he had a steady girlfriend, and he merely said he saw somebody from time to time. Eventually, I spotted a small story in the Times which stated he was a financial advisor to the Duchess of York, and I was quite shocked. I called him up to tell him, so you finally made it, but he wouldn't take my call. When he finally ditched Catherine, she understandably saw him in a new light. Sneaky, devious, king rat were some of the choicer epithets she used. But she had to admit, Johnny Bryan loves adventure, loves the fast lane and everything. He's fascinated with speed, whether it's airplanes or fast cars. That's how he lives his life. It was also, she surmised, why he had taken coke with her that night. It gives him a buzz, she said. There was never any hint that Sarah ever took drugs, and I'm quite sure she didn't. She was a patron of the Chemical Dependency Center in London and did much good work for charity in that field. But, ironically, among her friends were alcoholics and addicts, people like the Marquis of Blandford, her skiing chum. Is it Guy Wadsworth? Like I said before, in Canada, G-U-I is pronounced Guy, because it's French, right? Guy Wadsworth and various other people had all been reportedly involved in drug abuse of some kind. Catherine and I sat down to analyze the man who was snapped frolicking with a topless Sarah at that sunlit villa in the south of France, the little-known Texan who overnight became a household name himself and set tongues wagging round the world. John Bryan loves a challenge, it turns him on, she said revealingly. He wanted me, and the more I ran away, the more he wanted me. He's that type of person. He was pursuing me so relentlessly that in the end I thought, oh, go on, you can have it. It took him 2 months. That was the length of our affair. And the day after we went to bed together, he lost interest. That is so depressing. We only slept together once. It was on a Saturday night, 2 months after our first meeting, and he had taken me to Annabelle's for dinner. Then we headed for tramps, in what was becoming a familiar route before we went back to the penthouse in Chelsea. That just sounds like such a miserable life at 35 years old. Like going out to dinner, going to a nightclub, staying till 3 a.m., going home, taking coke, like, ugh, I couldn't hack it. Before we went back to the penthouse in Chelsea, I have to say that John Bryan was very good in bed, though I never enjoyed the royal treatment of his toe-sucking speciality. I have never been to bed with an American before, but Johnny was very much into fitness. He was action man between the sheets, a very aggressive, very active lover who could keep going for a long time. I felt at one point he could go on forever and ever. That's probably one of the reasons that Sarah became so attached to him. She's a very sexy lady, but I cannot believe for 1 minute that Johnny Bryan is in love with Sarah. What we had between us was a kind of mind game. He was toying with me, like mental foreplay. I was the last girlfriend he had before he moved his attentions over to the Duchess of York. But Johnny was a show-off. I mean, did she write all this down? I'm so confused. But Johnny was a show-off. He would throw his money around like water, and my goodness, how he would drop names. One night at Annabelle's, they played a Frank Sinatra record, Strangers in the Night, and Johnny said, "Oh, I remember when Frank was singing this for me. I was just a boy, and he was chasing my mother for a long time and sang this special song for me in front of her." I laughed at that. I could just hear Johnny regaling his audience with it. But the clearest image I retain of the Texan Longhorn is one of the self-seeking egotism and ambition. And in the dreadful breakup of the marriage of Sarah and Andrew, I share Catherine's verdict, king, rat. The fact is that all along Johnny had nothing to lose, while for Sarah, whatever her headstrong foolishness, everything was in jeopardy. And for Catherine, Johnny was like so many men, she told me. She told me, with the brittle benefit of hindsight, to him everything was a goal, everything was an achievement. A woman was there to be conquered, that's how he thought. I would hardly call us lovers, though I'm sure he would have liked me to fall in love with him, but at least I was spared that indignity. There are so many men like him, the privileged rich who manipulate women for their own ends. It really is just a game with them. John is into all things that men like him want in life: power, money, and status. I sometimes think we probably could have had a proper, longer-lasting relationship if John had not been so hell-bent on achievement, through the royal family or anybody in high society. But I also wanted to see how he would react to me afterwards. I found out the hard way. After I left his flat that Sunday morning, I never heard from John Bryan again. I leaned forward and took Catherine's hands. "After all that, looking back, what did you get out of it?" She thought for a long moment. Then she tossed her ash-blonde hair back, tilted her chin, and replied, "A bit of a thrill, that's all." Oh, poor thing. We've all been there, haven't we? There's always some idiot looking to make time. Okay, well, I think that's it for me. The next chapter, I think, is going to be sad because I think it's about the death of her mother, so I don't want to go to bed on that chapter. And that's going to be chapter 23. When does it all blow up? When does everyone find out? I don't know. Well, hard to say. Well, thank you so much for being with me. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your evening, and hopefully I don't get the reading bug again because I just need to go and do my knitting. My man's away for the next week because he's visiting his friends a couple provinces away. And I was supposed to, remember I told you I was knitting a scarf, and remember I told you I got ticked off at him, and so I ripped it out. Did I tell you that? Well, confession's good for the soul, bad for the reputation. Anyway, I ripped it all out because I got so mad at him one day. So I had to restart it. So I still haven't finished it because I was so busy cooking all over Christmas. All I did was cook. So I gotta put myself in the bed and knit away. And I don't know. I had Midsummer Murders on earlier. Sometimes I get a little blue if I watch too many murder-related shows, even though they're technically cozy mysteries. Like I don't know. It sits heavy with me. I don't know. So I don't know what I'll put on. Maybe some more worst jobs in history. All right. I will. Oh, wait a second. I meant to tell you. So I was looking up, remember by, what is her name? Jilly Cooper. So she had that series. Now, the one called Polo, I guess, it's the second or third in the series. I can't remember. She has this whole huge series. Now, if you were in the UK during the 80s and 90s, I mean, I'm sure you already know this. She wrote this whole series of, like, I think they're smutty romance books that are kind of centered around, like, some sort of equestrian sport, let's say. And Disney Plus has turned them into a series that's now on series 2. But I want to read the Polo. I don't want to I want to read them, but I think there's like 13 of them, and they're like 900 pages. I couldn't find one at my local library. I did find, okay, every once in a while, if you're looking on like an ebook site, and it'll tell you to look at a sample. Sometimes, for some reason, the sample is the whole book. So I did find the whole book. And I don't know. I was kind of interested in reading it, but here's the problem is that I don't like to waste my reading time on trashy novels because I feel like my reading time is so limited that I like to read things that I feel are like edifying, like they're going to make me more intelligent, they're going to make me smarter, they're going to make me more knowledgeable, etc., etc. I have a very hard time, like this is reading for pleasure, but it's also information. That's how it's gossipy. So this is as silly as I go, because I also feel like, well, it also has some historical context. I don't know. That's what I tell myself to make myself feel better. But if any of you have read the Jilly Cooper novels regarding, I think it's like Riders. There's like Riders, there's Rivals, there's Polo. There's a bunch of them. And the covers are hilarious. It's like a woman in riding breeches and there's got like a man with his hand on her bottom. It's okie dokie. If you have any book recommendations or if you've read them, I would love to know your reviews on them. All right. I will talk to you very, very soon. Have a very good night. And I hope you noticed that I hardly touched my hair at all. Just down here. Bye.